And then June 6th happens, and they hadn't had a single conversation with a single player. They built it behind the scenes with two very smart private equity guys, and then they released it to the players 30 minutes before they announced it on Fox Business.
Put that coffee down.
Creators are leaders. Be careful what kind of leaders you're producing here.
Helen, we're both in sales.
Let me tell you why I suck as a salesman.
They realized that to be in power, you didn't need guns or money or even numbers. You just needed the will to do what the other guy wouldn't.
I'm not leaving. The show goes on.
Hey there, friend. Welcome back to the Construction Leadership Podcast. I am your host, Bradley Hartman. I'm excited to dive into this episode here today because it is with my good friend, Mr. Jon Vaughan. Back on episode 323, we held our inaugural Varsity Sports and Leadership episode with Jon Vaughan. And the idea was really to have conversations that him and I have either on the phone or through text message threads, which is looking at the business world, management and leadership through the lens of sport. We're both sports nerds, and things will be happening with our local sports teams or the environment for football or basketball or baseball mainly, or golf. We'll say, oh my God, there's such an important element here that applies to businesses today. We need to talk about it. So we met up in Vegas at the International Builders Show last year. I guess it was technically this year. In 2023, in March, we recorded an episode there. Jon was also on our show in episodes 250, 132, and 92. So apparently every 50 or 100 episodes, we get Jon in the mix here. And every time I talk to him, I'm entertained. I learned something more. He's a wonderful human being. So I was excited to get back together with him on this episode. We cover a few different things. We talk about University of Iowa football and the Brian Ferentz situation and nepotism when it comes to sports and business and how to lead multi-generational businesses. We also talk about when you're paying too much money to certain people. We kind of tie this back to the NIL, name, image, and likeness situation in college football. And then we kind of do a deeper dive in the different elements of LIV Golf and the PGA and what sort of business insights, relevant, strategic, and tactical things you can learn from that to apply to your own business, to be a better manager and be a better leader. So without further ado, please enjoy this edition of Varsity Sports and Leadership with Jon Vaughan. As always, thanks for listening and watching. That's right. If you're only listening, we're going to be available on YouTube. Whole bunch of clips we're putting up there so you can see me and Jon in action in the entirety, as well as small bite-sized clips to make them more shareable. As always, thank you for listening. Mr. Jon Vaughan, welcome back to Varsity Sports, where we talk about business through the lens of sport. Great to be here with you.
Great to be back with you, not in person like we were in Las Vegas last time,
Correct.
But really good to be able to do this again.
Absolutely. So you know the drill. We have 4 8-minute quarters. That does not mean we are, wedged in to 4 topics. And actually today, we're going to cover 3. We're going to talk about this amazing situation with our friend Brian Ferentz at the University of Iowa football team. We're going to start there. We're then going to talk a little bit about the transfer portal / NIL, name, image, and likeness, and all the money sloshing around there and some unintended consequences. We'll take a quick break. We got a little halftime show, as far as you know. And then we are going to finish with, there's so much to talk about. And I know you are a golf nerd. You are wearing some very swanky, statusy dad vest stuff right now. That's and it's right. A secret society of golfers you'll tell us about later. We're going to talk about LIV Golf, PGA. There are so many lessons to draw from that. But Jon, let's just dive in. Who is Brian Ferentz?
Brian Ferentz may be the most innovative offensive coordinator in football right now. He is the son of Kirk Ferentz, who is a legendary coach in the Big Ten, has been with Iowa for decades and has just built an incredible program. But his son, Brian Ferentz, had the distinction of getting to the Big Ten championship game and then getting relieved of his duties. Your defense has to be next level and your offense has to be next level bad to go to a Big Ten championship game and then be relieved of your duty. That my favorite stat that came out of that really defines what the Brian Ferentz era ended like was in the Big Ten championship game. For all the gamblers out there, the over-under for points for Iowa in a Big Ten championship game was 0.5.
And they beat the under.
And they hit the under.
I read about in Iowa City, there was a bar that was having free beer from kickoff until Iowa scored any points. And I just hope there was lots of Ubers there available because everybody got hammered. They did not score at all.
It is such a story of, so many in our industry, there's so many family businesses and bringing kids into the business is challenging. You want to be able to have this mindset of, I have passed something along, my wisdom, my experience, my history, my legacy on to my progeny, and they're going to carry it forward. A lot of people in that position go one of two ways. They either say, my kid is so great, he's going to do everything, he's the best, let's put him in a position or her in a position right away. And they end up getting what happens with Brian. Or they're going to be so tough and so hard and, they're not going to be the son of the boss, and that they put him in a corner and they say, hey, you're going to be an analyst for the next 10 years until you figure out this business. And I think this is a story of the latter, which is Brian Ferentz was not ready for the job, and people that were more qualified and that frankly would have done a better job lost out. And it affects the Iowa team and program in a major way because they are way behind now.
Well, especially when you have different parts of the teams. And I know you and I often talk about, it's not the only way to look at businesses, but in ours, sometimes you have the sales team over here. We can think of them being on offense, and you have operations on defense, and you have one side of the ball. The defense was, I believe, a top 3, maybe the best defensive team in the country. And then the offense was literally one of the worst teams. They were absolutely terrible. And I don't know any details. I can only imagine, though, that created friction, frustration, some animosity between the two sides of the ball, which is what tears team apart. However, let me pose this to you. They went 10-3, right?
They did.
Now, granted, the Big Ten West is like, that is the junior varsity. They're terrible. Like Illinois, my alma mater, I think they scratched out 3 or 4 wins. Like, they're terrible. At what point do you say, listen, if we believe in the coach and we say to the coach, your job is to win games. Your job isn't to score points. Your job is to win games, and we trust you to win games, and we give you the autonomy to hire whoever you feel is best and you trust the most. Can't we just look at this and say, listen, man, they won 10 games. Last year, a couple years ago, I think they won 11. Like, why is that a problem, Jon?
You absolutely can look at it and say those things. At the same time, it can also be true that after winning 10 games, they relieved the son of his duties. And so you've got to be able to have these honest, open conversations about, because who on the staff is going to be like, Coach Ferentz, can we sit down and talk about our offense for a second? I don't think it's working. Maybe it's injuries. Maybe it's our guys just aren't playing hard. Maybe it's certainly not the scheme. It's never going to be the scheme. Let's take that off the table because this coordinator is crushing it. But everything else I think is wrong with the offense. Well, how does that conversation even work and happen?
Well, the other thing is Brian was a really good lineman who also played at Iowa,
right?
Never was a quarterback, never coached quarterbacks, never ran an offense until he did this. And then you see the quarterback play, which, it kind of is a flashback to like the late 1940s when they passed the ball 12 times and it was expected that you would have 9 of them incomplete. Like, it was so bad, but you're like, this guy has never done this. Why? And he was also the quarterback coach, which is stunning. Let him coach linemen. He was a good lineman.
Right. Yeah. Tom Brady is not going to be a wide receivers coach.
He shouldn't, right? Relevant here to say, all right, you got Bill Belichick.
Same.
To what degree is it hypocritical if you win doing it? Right. And I think I've heard different things from Boston fans on the quality of talent of coaching of Belichick's sons. But if you're winning and you're going to the playoffs every year, it's easy to overlook when you go, when the Bears almost have twice as many wins as the Patriots, all of a sudden people start questioning who the coaches are. So it's Belichick and he's got 2 of his sons. You've been involved with this. If someone was coming to you and saying like, what do you think the best course of action is? And let's assume it's a private company. Like what's like the headline you give them that you haven't stressed already about managing when you have different generations in the business?
So I think one of the things that I heard years ago was this concept of if things are going well, make sure you understand why they're going well, because if they go wrong, you won't know how to fix them if you don't already know that. And so being able to get into this kind of mindset around Kirk Ferentz or Bill Belichick, when things are going well, it really doesn't matter who's on your staff. But as soon as it starts to go bad, why is it going bad? Mm-hmm. And if you didn't know it on the first place, you're going to be spinning back and trying to figure it out on the fly in a way that's really, really challenging. And there's a hubris that gets built when you're being successful that everything I've touched so far is working, so it's going to continue to forever. And that's just not the case. And so being able to have objective, honest, authentic conversations about how's the development of the people within the business that are in a position of within the family, mm-hmm. Like you've got to build that, whether it's an internal and external board of advisors, whether it's formal or informal, you've got to be able to go to the owner and say, your son, your daughter, your uncle, your nephew, your niece, your cousin, whatever, is doing really well in this and is skilled in that. Or the harder conversation, they're not cutting it. And this is what I see. We need to coach them and help them in these ways, or, hey, they're just not putting in the effort. They don't have the capability, the talent to do this sort of thing. We want them to be successful. We want you to be successful. Let's get them in a position where they can be successful. Not every next generation person can be the president. Yeah. They can't be the VP of ops. They can't be the VP of sales. It's just not possible. Genetics are great, but the business size and scale and scope is almost always going to be different on the next generation than it is in the current generation. And so if I just have a replica of me and we're running a business 25, 30 years from now, then there's no way I'm going to be ready to do that well. So how is my son or daughter going to be able to do that well?
Yeah.
If they're a carbon copy of what I've tried to create.
Yeah. And I think this idea of, and we work a lot with our clients doing this, it's not easy. It doesn't come easily. It's just documenting assumptions. And we were doing a session recently as we were looking into next year. And one of them said candidly about their son, who wasn't in the room, they just said like, hey, I think we really need to coach him up. I think our success here has been due to other market factors. And the fact we landed these 2 clients that were real big this year that came from our top sales guy, all indications would be he's doing an amazing job. I think he's got a lot of wind at his back right now that really we need to coach up on. So like his assumption was we're being successful despite my son who's in the business, who's leading this group. And I just kind of said, hey, I think this is just, number one, we have to be thoughtful about how we share this. Number 2, this is really important. Like really important. Let's continue to really be candid there. So,
awesome. I think too, like coming out of COVID, like if you weren't doing well, then you were doing it real wrong because you had every tailwind you could imagine, lumber yes. pricing, housing starts, lack of availability of product, like everything is coming up aces. When all of a sudden you've got some headwinds, you better be able to make those adjustments quick.
Yeah, love it. All right, let's switch over to the transfer portal. NIL, I got a couple different aspects here.
Transfer over to the next topic. Are you going to put booing in during that particular comment?
Yeah, okay. we can. We have audio engineers who can do amazing things. Yes. We'll transfer the next topic. Thanks, John. Economics 101. Incentives matter. And if there's too much money sloshing around in the system, bad things happen. I'm going to throw that out there. Maybe you can take it that way. The other thing I want to throw at you, and you can just take it any way you want, is we love talking about grit, right? It's a book. And then we love, who was that? Was that Duckworth? Was that Karen Duckworth?
Yep, Angel Duckworth.
Okay. All right. We love talking about that. Now it's on shirts. There's a little local baseball team. That is the team named Grit. They got a bunch of 9-year-olds running around there. I think we've set up a system here which does kind of feed into some of the stereotypes about young people today, which I've seen. I think many of them are true, which is when the going gets tough, I get going. I'm jumping ship. I'm going to someplace else. I'm moving there. And if I work at 8 jobs in the first 6 years, you know what I've done? I've sampled well, and I've learned what I like and what I don't like. Are we creating the conditions where we're going to have players that are just, the minute there's any sort of struggle, they're just bailing? I don't know. Take that any way you want.
You know, that is a huge, I mean, as a college football, basketball fan, it's really changed how you cheer for a team. They've created, through the transfer portal and through NIL, a farm system that's more akin to minor league baseball than it is to college scholarship athletes, which we could do 4 quarters on calling college athletes scholarship athletes. It's like, okay. But now all of a sudden, it's all about the yield. So I'm a 5-star rated quarterback, and I want to start now. So I'm not going to go to the school that's going to help me develop and grow. And I have a outgoing starter. I can get $1 million. Mm-hmm. I'm going there. And then halfway through the season, I get hurt. The backup comes in. He plays well. He's going to get the job next year. I'm done with this contract. I'm going to the next school whose quarterback just graduated or is going to the pros. And so it just becomes this, all of a sudden, this turnstile. It was bad with college basketball. It's lost the name recognition. You don't have these 2-year, 3-year, 4-year starters where you start to get to know the people that you love or the people that you hate, like Christian Laettner. But there's it's a one and done scenario, and it's driven by, it was the $100 handshakes, and now it's the local HVAC company who's giving Kool-Aid McKinstry from Alabama $300,000 to go on a commercial.
Yeah.
So you're not able to build team. You're not able to build camaraderie. You're not able to build culture. And the ones that do it really, really well, like the Kirby Smarts and Nick Sabans of the world, are doing it differently than the Jimbo Fishers, who are just saying, I got the best recruiting class in history by spending the most NIL money. Mm-hmm. And then nobody really has any sort of loyalty or fealty to the team. They have it to themselves. It reminds me of a line by Simon Sinek. Simon Sinek says, if you have people that work for your paycheck, they're going to continue to only follow the paycheck. But you want people who work for you, who believe in what you're doing, and then you'll always have a more successful team.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to throw 2 different scenarios that I would say kind of fall into the category of unintended consequences. You on a scale of 0 to 100, 0 impossible, 100 absolute certainty, 50 you're a dart throwing chimp. You do not know, and you're going to flip a coin. All right. I want a number. First one is 5 years down the road, John, we find that actually the best college athletes stay in college longer. Graduation rates go up. Why? I'm already a professional athlete. I got $1 million and I'm in Athens, Georgia. When I was in college and I was working and I had like $100 in my pocket back in 1999, I was a king. I couldn't spend that much money. How much fun are they having with $1 million and being on a college campus? All right, 0 to 100. 0 is impossible. 100 certainty. 50 is you're a chimp. What do you say? We find that the best athletes stay in college longer.
The best athletes, I'd say 10.
Fine.
Because you can make $1 million in college and you still have to go to class and you still have to get grades and you still have to do study hall and you still have all the prescripted scheduling that you've got. If I'm Caleb Williams, I'm going pro because I'm tired of having this microscope on me that They're showing me, they're crying on the sidelines. I'm making this $2 million. I have to do the stupid Nissan commercials, all that kind of stuff. If I go pro, I may, you're going to make a lot more than that.
Yeah.
And you don't have to go to class and you don't have to do the schedule. Now, for the offensive lineman who's kind of making $100,000, yeah, graduation rates as a whole, that may be 85. I've never thought about that angle. That's why you're the best in the business, smartest guy I've ever met. Is those guys who want to make sure they stick around to get their NIL money, they may play an extra year, their fifth year senior, when they otherwise would have gone ahead and gone into the business world because they get one more year of $100,000 of NIL money.
Got it. All right, next one. We fast forward, I'm going to say 4 years. There's a basic demise of the bowl system as it is. There's going to be so many people that are not going to play one extra game for the South American Wasabi Southwest Continental Airlines Bowl if they're not part of the 12. So like if you make it to the playoffs, yeah, we're going to go there because we have a chance to win the Natty. If not, we're done. And we're seeing so many players that obviously many of them are going to the NFL or want to go to the NFL who are like, I'm not going to play this last meaningless game against, Fresno State. Forget it. I'm out. What do you think? 0 to 100?
I think that's probably closer to a 75. Okay. The reason being, you even see it in the Georgia-Florida State game, the 5 versus the 6. Their best players on Florida State have already opted out. And I would guess between now and before they have their press conferences, there's going to be more and more players that continue to back out. And you're going to have, it's going to basically become the Pro Bowl. Don't hit me too hard because we don't want anybody hurt. Right? It's just going to be, so you're going to see that. And that's when there's only 2 semifinal games. Mm-hmm. When there's 12 people in and all of a sudden Missouri's in a playoff as the number 10 or 11 seed, like who's going to watch the Meineke Car Care Bowl, the Music City Bowl? Nobody's going to watch it and nobody's going to play in it either. Right. And you've got to have the yield, and especially the way that network television is changing, that this was driven by, this is the television contract by FS1, who we've seen what's happened with a lot of the FS1 stuff, or it's on Bally's. We've seen what happened with Bally's. Mm-hmm. Like you're going to have these television contracts completely change, and it may be live streamed, but why would Apple or Amazon or Netflix pick up anything like that?
Yeah, exactly. Okay. All right. We're going to go to halftime. Time for a quick break. And we're back. All right. You've been wanting to talk about this. I said, how long would we need to hit some of the most impactful, most relevant elements of the LIV Golf PGA thing so our listeners could get something to apply and to run better businesses? You said to me 13 and a half hours, which surprised me. I didn't think there was enough there, but maybe there is. This has been going on since June? Like, I remember where I was. It was June. I was in San Francisco area driving when I heard that the PGA merged / folded with LIV Golf. For people that have not been following this, that are not part of some secret society golf thing that you can't even tell me about.
Can't tell you about it.
You can't. Only / philanthropists can be part of it. Give us the brief overview. Give me a minute overview for folks that haven't been following this. And then let's start. You mentioned hubris before. I was going to say hubris, which I believe is inaccurate. I believe it's hubris. Start there. So give us an overview and then talk about hubris and why that's kind of a core element of this story.
So Greg Norman, probably 20 years ago, tried to start a world tour. Greg Norman is not the most well-liked person in the PGA Tour realms. Kind of been blackballed a couple different times. So look back 2.5 years ago, they started LIV Golf, and it's backed by the Saudi Public Investment Fund. And their goal was to partner with the PGA Tour and to have these small mini events across the world, that LIV, it's LIV, the Roman numeral for 54. They play 54 holes of golf. They call it Golf But Louder. That may be the dumbest motto I've ever heard. Golf, but louder. And it was shotgun start, 54 holes, players wearing shorts because everybody misses seeing what their calves look like. And it's huge purses. Their goal is to partner with the PGA Tour and be part of their schedule on off weeks when they're playing the Barracuda or the Barbasol or something like that, where the biggest players aren't coming. The PGA Tour tries to knock them off like a gnat off their shoulder, forgetting that Saudi Arabia's got a little bit of money. And then as it started gaining traction and LIV started putting money towards players, all of a sudden, players started defecting. And it was going to be like, oh, well, it's just the old players like Phil Mickelson. Oh, it's just the irrelevant players like Kevin Na. Oh, it's just the players who've totally lost their game like Matthew Wolff. Oh, it's the British Open champion, Cam Smith. And so it just really started to grow. It's Brooks Koepka, one of the best golfers in the world. Oh, but he's off his game. Nobody really likes him. Nobody likes Bryson DeChambeau. Oh, it's just the misfits. It's Bubba Watson and Bryson DeChambeau and Dustin Johnson. And then all of a sudden, it was really affecting the quality of the product on the PGA Tour. So June 6th, there was announced this agreement, a framework for an agreement between the PGA Tour and LIV, that after the commissioner of the PGA Tour had said over and over and over again on camera, we will never make a deal with LIV. They're the enemy. They're sports washing. This is the Saudis trying to buy us. We don't want that blood money on our hands. I don't know what these families tell their friends and families who have people that were, they went as far as bringing up 9/11 and that the Saudis were from there. And so, I'm not saying that Dustin Johnson is pro-ISIS, but he's taking the money.
We should point out, and when you say they were given money, like just Dustin Johnson got several $100 million guaranteed. So it's like, hey, you could
$100 million guaranteed. $100 million for Brooks Koepka. You don't have to win a tournament.
Right.
You're getting $100 million. Phil Mickelson, you're getting $200 million. And so it was huge money that they were offering. And at the same time, the purses had grown in the PGA Tour since Tiger, but not like this. And so all of these players came behind their leader, and Jay Monahan, who's the commissioner of the PGA Tour, and said, hey, you take a Rory McIlroy or a Justin Thomas who kind of led the fight to say, no, we are all about legacy. We're all about purity of sport. We're all about standing behind this, being major champions, winning. So we back you, Jay. We're not leaving. And then June 6th happens, and they hadn't had a single conversation with a single player. They built it behind the scenes with two very smart private equity guys, and then they released it to the players 30 minutes before they announced it on Fox Business.
Wow. Well, when I heard about LIV Golf coming out and they were more exciting, more fun, I immediately thought about Major League Baseball, NBA, NFL. All have had similar things. By the way, do you know why we call it the National League and the American League instead of conferences in baseball?
I don't.
It's because these were two competing leagues at the beginning of the 20th century, and they were finally like, you got the Cubs, we got the White Sox, we're killing each other, and there wasn't a big enough audience. They finally said,
like the NFC and the AFC.
Same thing happened in the NFL, the ABA and the NBA. ABA, there's a book behind me. It's fantastic. It's called Loose Balls by a guy whose last name is Pluto. All true. And it was about the history. It's an oral history of the ABA. It is hilarious and crazy. And you can't believe the ABA stuck around for 9 years, but they could dunk. They had a red and white ball. They made it more fun. And when they merged, they adopted a lot of those. So I'm like, there is a track record of this happening. And then you also have the Saudi PIF has billions and billions of dollars. So what do you think the strategy was when they said, you know what we should do? We should sue these guys, knowing that a countersuit is going to happen. And also maybe just give a little context about the business model of the PGA, because the PGA was originally set up as a non-for-profit because of tax reasons, right?
It still is. It's still a not-for-profit. And until what they're building in this framework agreement is that there's going to be a for-profit company over the top of them. And so, they're very philanthropic in the PGA. At every tour stop that they go to, they donate a ton of money. But the business model, because of that, what's happened to PGA Tour golf is some of these TV contracts, they've had to try to ramp up all these sponsors. They're asking for more money because they're trying to lift up these purses, because the players are now looking at and saying, like Tiger, they offered Tiger somewhere between, not confirmed, somewhere between $700 million and $1 billion. So more than Shohei Ohtani, who's in the prime of his career and just got offered $1 a day for 700 million days from the Oakland A's. But for a guy who had a broken leg and a broken back and a broken neck and will never win another major, they offered him 700 million. So they just had endless flows of cash. And so the PGA was trying to do things to try to entice players to stay. And just, it was creating unending commercials on their television. And just, it was becoming unbearable to watch almost.
So what could Jay have done differently? Jay Monahan, right? Because I think he knew. Now, I don't know him that well. My guess is he's not an idiot. That's my guess. I could be wrong, but maybe he's not an idiot. My guess is he'd said, listen, we've been talking about, and the players on the PGA that have been, given the stiff arm to mixed sporting references, to live. If we go to them and say, I know we've been deny, hate, enemy. Actually, we're just going to do this. They got a lot of money. We're both going to agree to drop the lawsuits. We're bleeding cash and we're going to join. They know Tiger would have lost his mind. Rory would have come out, and then they wouldn't have been able to control the narrative. In essence, they were selling the business, right? And when you sell a business and you got a large team, I'm not sure if you've ever been through this. My guess is you're not like, what we should do? Let's run this by, bring all the employees and get their perspectives. If you go back in time and you say, Jay, what you're about to do on June 5th is going to be terrible. It's going to be a shit show. Here's what you should do. What would that advice sound like?
Well, first of all, you back up all the way to 2 years ago when really they wanted to partner, and what the Saudis wanted was a seat at the table.
Yes.
They wanted a piece of the PGA Tour so that they could be able to be a part of having these events, have one in Saudi Arabia, have one in Southeast Asia, have one in Africa, all these things that they could be a part of and start to reap the rewards. Because all of a sudden during COVID, golf participation was starting to go like this, and it hit, for those of you listening, my hand is going down.
Downward trend.
Downward. I know this for a medium that's on a podcast, you can't see my hand. And then COVID hit, and everybody had to be outside, and golf's popularity skyrocketed. And so they were seeing this trend, and they wanted to be a part of it. So had Jay even humored them and walked through it and tried to work through it and tried to negotiate through it, they would have had a much better outcome. Instead, Jay gave them the stiff arm, like you said, and just said, no, we're not negotiating with you. We don't need you. We don't want you. So my first advice would have been, like, he thought he had a product that was unbeatable. Like Blockbuster thought they had a product that was unbeatable. Like Sears thought they had a product that was unbeatable. And they didn't see the changes to what was coming down the road. It kind of matches with the NIL stuff, because these kids, like, the opportunity for money that all of them have, like, these guys are grinding. If you're a PGA Tour player and you're number 30 through 75, and that's who stays in and gets to play in the Tour Championship, you better be playing every week. So you're going from the Greenbrier in West Virginia, then you're going to Charlotte for the Wells Fargo, and then you're going to Atlanta for the Bell South, and then you're going to, so you are grinding. And so they just wanted to play less events. And so they were trying to raise the purses. Well, LIV says you'll play 12 events. You're going to make a minimum of $1 million. And they had kind of a soccer relegate. Don't finish in the bottom four. You're coming back next year and you're going to make a ton of money.
So let me ask you, could there be some unintended consequences here with golf and the product itself when there is, again, that much money sloshing around? Because I think it was John Feinstein. He wrote a book, and maybe it was called Q School, or it was about Q School. And he was following around these guys who, how many rounds you play in Q School? It's more than 4, right? Or is it 4?
Yeah, It's changed so many times, but it used to be that you had to go through like 4 rounds.
Yes.
Of Q school, but that's not 4 rounds of golf.
Yeah. So, but it was the story and how these guys played. Yeah, like all these rounds. I've shot hundreds and hundreds of shots, and it comes down, and I miss 1 putt, and I do not make the PGA Tour. Isn't that part of what makes golf great? You know what's on the line. If you line up, now I get the Masters, right? So take the 4 majors out, but you line up, and you're like, if Jon makes this putt, he will earn $105 million. If he does not, he will still make $95 million. Shh, let's see what he does. Who cares? But like, what's on the line? I mean, yeah, the majors will still matter, but I'm like, otherwise you see these guys come out of nowhere and you're like, he's going to be on a non-charter plane to going to Memphis for next week because he's got to make money to scratch out a living in this thing. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of the romanticism and beauty of what was built of the Palmers, the Trevinos, the Nicklases, all that was, Lee Trevino had a line, exactly what you described is like pressure. Pressure is not putting for the difference in at the time, 105,000 or 80,000 to win this tournament. Pressure is gambling on a course and hustling somebody, and you have a putt for $1,000 and you have $0 of cash in your golf bag. Like, so that's part of the romanticism of watching these guys struggle their way through, and that everything is earned.
Right.
It's not, it's not a contract for a football player who, it doesn't matter if he starts 12 games or 16 games or 17 games or 2. Like, they got to earn every penny that they make out there. And there's a list. And if you don't get into that list of a top 125 next year, you don't get your tour card. And somebody is out there grinding away to try to make sure they're 125 and you're 126. Like, that's part of what makes, for me, the sport super interesting and great is, you talk about a game of inches, you lip out a putt on 18 and you miss the cut, you're slamming your trunk with nothing.
Yeah.
You make that putt, you may be going home with 125,000.
Mm-hmm. So 2 things here. I think from a business standpoint, making sure our past success doesn't limit our imagination about what could happen in the future. Now, knowing what we know now, but if I went to Jay and I'll say, all right, Jay, let's play this out a little bit. Saudi PIF comes to you. They say, you want to be a partner. You're like, give them the middle finger, beat it. Not interested. We're the PGA. We're legacy, legendary. Fine. Say they push back and say for some reason, which you hardly need a reason these days, they sue us and we end up, and maybe we sue them. Is that possible? I'm like, that's not that crazy of a notion. And then we are now in a lawsuit with the PIF, and we are a not-for-profit, and they have trillions in deep pockets and we don't. It's not that crazy. I'm like, it seemed to me a little bit of, and maybe this analogy is overworn, but checkers versus chess. I feel like Jay was looking one move ahead when, had you looked a few moves ahead, you do not want to be in a lawsuit with them just bleeding you out year after year after year on legals fees. So I just think that of like, you got to have some imagination about how could this go really, really bad? And how do I make sure I don't end up there?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. It's so often it's what's in my face right now is the most important thing. And if I don't address this problem right now, then I can't get to the next problem, then to the next problem, to the next problem. Nobody really steps back and says, oh, this is a problem that may have more tentacles than I think, unless I think those 3 moves 5 years, 7 years ahead.
Right.
What happens? I mean, you think about whether it's in our industry, it's what's going to happen with labor. If you weren't thinking about what's going to happen with labor 10 years ago, and you were still expecting everybody to stick frame every roof, then you didn't invest in trusses. And now you're like, holy cow, I'm way behind. I should have thought as, what happened through the global financial crisis and people leaving the country and immigration law changes. And all of a sudden we've lost this whole generation of framers. We're not going to be able to retrain these framers to bird mouth a roof rafter. Mm-hmm. We better get into trusses like right now. And so like you can't just be like, we don't have enough framers right now. Whatever, go get this order pulled for tomorrow, right? I mean, you got to be thinking about that and creating time to think about it and having that those people around you that are willing to say, Jay, okay, there's a PGA Tour policy board that's filled with players, and he didn't even talk to them about this framework. It's like, why have a policy board if you're not going to talk to them about their next policy?
And Jay would say, because I know what they were going to say. I don't talk to people when I know what they're going to say.
That's exactly right.
That's a failure of leadership.
It's a failure of leadership.
All right, I want to ask you, watching the time, we've totally blown our 4 8-minute quarters. That's fine. You've said this to me, and I've written it down before. Marry the mission, not the model. What does that mean?
So marry the mission, not the model. I've used that a lot of times. And so when I think about marry the mission, not the model is like, let's even use baseball as a kind of a contra story to them. Baseball is also filled with people who are very tied to the history of it, the legacy of it, the romanticism of 9 innings, pitchers changing out the whole thing. And over time, there was creep to where games were lasting 4.5 hours, 5 hours. And the baseball purists, so to speak, were the ones who said, we don't change rules. We're not going to put pitch clocks. We're not going to do any of these sorts of things because that's not the way that the model is. Yeah, but the mission of baseball is to be America's game and America's pastime and all these sorts of things. And they finally woke up to say, okay, I'm still going to be married to the mission of 9-inning game. Like, what are the things that are unchangeable? 9-inning games, 3 outs an inning, whatever the case may be. But we're going to change the model by saying we're going to put a pitch clock, and you have to pitch to 3 batters if you're brought in to pitch. And you can't walk out to the mound 12 times. And all of a sudden the game's dropped, 51 minutes a game?
Yeah, I think they were at 308, 315, and they went down to 240 and change. But
significant reduction, which meant viewership went up, which meant everything, the joy of the game. Now we've got this new movement around immaculate grid that's taken off and this baseball up. At the same time, the PGA Tour has said, no, I'm not going to really put timers on our golfers. We're not going to put them on the clock. We're not going to penalize them for taking too long. We're not going to think about, players wearing shorts again, whatever. But all of these things that were, no, I'm not going to be, their mission and their model are so tied together. They're unwilling to change. And all of a sudden the world has passed them by. But you think about have a mission. That's your core values. That's your mission, vision, values. But at the same time, the model is, we're not in manufacturing. Well, what if you hold so tight to that all of a sudden you've modeled yourself out of business?
Yeah.
You can still stick to that mission, but then change the process by which. And so it's principles over process as well. These are the principles that I'm going to do. The process by which we're going to do it may change.
Yeah. Well, not to tie this back to the halcyon days of Belichick, who we referenced earlier, he went to real run heavy, and then he got Randy Moss, and then he's just all right, what if we air the ball out 50 times a game? And then the idea of I'm going to adjust based on how our competitors, their strengths and weaknesses, and my own team, right? So that is more how do we change the scheme? But I think it's kind of the same thing, which is what are the things that have to be true? The Patriot way, how we treat each other, how we coach, know your role, do your job, blah, 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 whatever that is. But other than that, I'm going to adapt and I'm going to try to find ways to compete and succeed. And I heard several years ago, I had somebody, he works for the Rangers here. And he said something, he's it's America's game. It's America's pastime. I'm no, it isn't. It hasn't been America's pastime. The NFL took that over probably a decade ago. And he kind of laughed. He was kind of offended. It kind of ruined our relationship. But I believe we both believe I was right. But I think a lot of people hung on to that. Well, we were saying that for 70 years, that it's America's pastime. We're guess what?
And it just ties back to that. That's what I've always done. Mm-hmm. Why do you do it that way? Because why don't you have a pitch clock? Oh, well, Babe Ruth didn't pitch with a pitch clock.
Yeah.
Okay. Why don't you put players on the clock and penalize them? Oh, well, we've never done that. Jack Nicklaus never had that. I'm yeah, but it's just, you can't be tied to this fictional, this is the way we've always done it. And that means it's the best way.
Yep. Love it. All right, man. Well, I love this. I think we do need to give a shout out. This is coming around Christmas time. You and I both trade a lot of The Athletic app. Give a 30-second overview of what The Athletic is and why you love it.
So The Athletic is such a great news and sports and journalism. I mean, so much of the journalism of sports has been killed off by by entertainment media. But The Athletic is true sports journalism. It's great stories that have great writers. It's really giving what I grew up reading, getting the newspaper out and reading Sports Illustrated. SI is using AI. The Athletic is using real people telling great stories. And so most of the stories I read that are good about sports, that I know I can rely on it being at least investigated to some degree and having sources, and not be this fantastical Draymond Green needs to get kicked out of the NBA, which we could do one on that. Anyways, I go to The Athletic for that, and it's such a great read.
And what was it, $10 a month, $9 a month or something?
Yeah.
I don't even know. Yeah. I would just say if you like sports, you like humans who know how to write sentences and tell a story that have a beginning, middle, and end. And the headline isn't, this was on ESPN, and I almost threw my phone against the wall. I opened my phone. The first bullet point on ESPN app was Taylor Swift walks by, I don't know who the Chiefs were playing, walks by the players in the tunnel of the Eagles. And then I'm like, do not touch it. Do not click on that, because that's not a headline. That is not news. I get it. She's dating Kelsey. Don't care. This is not news.
Stephen A. Smith eviscerates the Cowboys.
Right.
That could have been from 2007 or
Correct.
2023.
Yes.
Mad Dog thinks that this guy's career is over after this statement. Awesome.
Yes. The other thing I was to say is you've belatedly started watching Succession.
Yes. Holy cow. If you want to go back to Brian Ferentz,
there you go. Right.
I still need to think about, I'm still new to it, so I'm still learning all the names, but man, if you want to watch a show that's super compelling, not with your children, around, what is growing a business, passing on a business, what are the wrong things to do, and what happens when you give kids too much, watch this show. I'm 5 episodes in. It's ridiculously good.
So good. Yes, that was yesterday's news. Actually, this one is, but I think a lot of people have not heard about it. I have never heard of it. It's called Slow Horses. Have you heard of this at all?
No, I've not heard of Slow Horses.
It's called, I know, funny name. Probably doing it a disservice. It's about MI5, British spies, and Slow Horses is kind of like the outpost. When you screw up, you go to this place called Slow House, and they call them Slow Horses. It was in the Wall Street Journal, and they're saying this is the best show no one knows about. And I kicked it over to my wife, and we started watching. It is phenomenal. Storytelling, acting, and I think there's 4 seasons already, which I'd never heard of it. I think it's on Apple. It has been by far the best show I've seen all year long. So if you guys are looking for something there, it was really good.
Slow Horses, add it to the list.
Add it to the list. All right. Mr. Jon Vaughan, thank you for making time. I love talking to you about sports and business. I think this is a great place to end.
Yeah, thank you, man. There's one thing I also wanted to ask you.
Sure.
You texted me earlier about how you agreed with Megan Rapinoe that her injury proves that there is no God. Could you tell me more about that?
A couple things there. Number 1, that's false. Number 2, no, I'm not going to come within 100 yards of discussing that with you or anyone or anyone else. Thank you for closing out the show with a lie to me and our audience. That is not true. And no, we're not going to discuss it. Thank you.
Thanks, Bradley.
All right, then, friends, how did that go? Hopefully you enjoyed my conversation with Mr. Jon Vaughan as we talked about business facets through the lens of sport. Our goal here in 2024 is to do more of these. Maybe, 8 to 12 a year. I don't know. We'll see how that goes. But our goal is to get some more traction with this. We've heard some good feedback from a small segment of the population of you guys who are listening. So if you have strong feelings one way or another, or you have suggestions on how to make it better, or hey, you like the format and we should have other people. Our goal is to have Jon, obviously, and some other business leaders join who are passionate about certain aspects of sport. But ultimately, we're going to tie it all the way back to business to give you some insights, to give you guys some strategies and tactics that you can apply in your business to be more productive and be more profitable. That's what it's all about. So if you have any feedback, we'd love to hear it. You can email us directly at info@Bradley Hartman, 2 N's, Bradley Hartman and Co. I know it's long, BradleyHartmanandCo.com. So info@BradleyHartmanandCo.com. We read all of them, especially the good ones, but also the nasty ones. If you have ways we can improve, we're trying to get better with every show, and appreciate you listening. So we're going to close out with our leadership mantra. You, my friend, are owed nothing. Deliver value first. Make it a great week.